Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe joins us from Cardiff in Wales. Welcome to Ideal Island Studios here in London.
Thank you.
Professor Wickramasinghe, you are a Sri Lankan-born, British-based scientist. We have heard about the model or the doctrine of panspermia. Explain to us what panspermia is about.
It is about the search for life in the universe and the thesis that life is a truly cosmic phenomenon. The standard so-called conventional point of view, particularly in Western Europe, has been that life originated on the Earth, started in a so-called primordial soup, and then magically emerged from chemistry to life, and then evolved further to all the life forms that we see here on our planet.
So if I can interject you there, you are referring to the established or what we call the norm of Darwin's theory?
Norm of Darwin's theory, that preceding Darwin's theory, was the Aristotelian point of view.
Right.
The theory of Aristotle, that life emerges from non-life, just like he described fireflies emerging from warm earth and morning dew. So, given the right conditions, in a pond of warm water, maybe a few organic molecules strewn in, then Aristotle's thesis is that life just emerges spontaneously.
So
now that is called the theory of spontaneous generation.
Right.
That held by Western science for pretty close to 2,000 years.
And you're challenging it with the late Sir Fred Hoyle.
Yeah, that's right. That's the point of view that I challenge in a very deep way, in a very profoundly important way, because I think the theory is flawed. Evidence has always been very sparse. And as I went through my research career, evidence was mounting against it in a very, very important way. So that was a trend of my research, essentially tracking the evidence from astronomy, from biology, that all seem to contradict the established position in science that life just emerges from non-living matter if you switch on the right conditions. That has never been proven. It's been a myth or ideology that people have just adhered to, for the reason that it goes back a long time in European history and culture. And I think that plays a very important role, has played a very important role in the past.
So, a theory that has evolved since Aristotle, and in the Western-dominated world, we assume that it all happened in accordance with the evolutionary theories, starting from non-life to life. Your theory, how did you get... well, first of all, what is panspermia? Now, I understand the two words. Pan means across, and of course sperm means the genesis or the importance of birth. Yeah, absolutely. So are you and the late Sir Fred Hoyle, you're looking at the world, the planet Earth, in addition to the rest of the universe with living beings, and that we were brought in from somewhere else, from another planet?
Well, not living beings in the sense of humans or animals or something, but the components, the living components, which are bacteria and viruses, carrying the information for life. The information for all of life is carried in bacteria and viruses, and we know that from laboratory work, not my particular laboratory work, but laboratory work over the last 20 or 30 years, that viruses are the carriers of information, and they could transfer information from insects to plants, to animals, and so on. So they are the transmitters. The viruses, I think, are the transmitters of genetic information, right? and the Darwinian story is just a fine-tuning of that, fine-tuning of the evolutionary process that is primarily directed by information supplied by cosmic viruses. The information for life is there, imprinted in the cosmos, right? It was there, I think, right from the beginning, if there was indeed a beginning, and that's something that I would like to also address a little bit, because the beginnings of life and the beginnings of the universe itself seem to be almost inextricably interlinked in Western scientific culture. It has been from the very earliest times, the sort of essentially the fabric of cosmology and the fabric of biology, to say that this is all a part of a universal system. But I think the situation that we have discovered is that life emerged on the Earth from the deep cosmos. It was brought here to the Earth in the form of bacteria initially, and then viruses came on, and then Darwin's natural selection operated, and all those processes together led to the elaboration of life forms, the evolution of life that we witness on our planet today. So that's broadly the story, but at the time that I started my work in Cambridge in 1960, there was hardly any evidence. I should say there was no evidence for any organic material outside of our planet. If you look at the night sky on a dark night, you see the Milky Way sort of right across from horizon to horizon, and these are trillions and trillions of stars. In between the stars, you see dark patches, very conspicuous dark patches, in various shapes, in the shapes of elephants' trunks and serpents and so on. And these are the dust clouds of space. They are the so-called nebulae, and in 1960, it was firmly believed that these are just trillions upon trillions of tiny ice crystals. That's what made up these dark clouds. And so that's where the conventional position lay when I started my work on the 2nd of October 1960. When I came from Sri Lanka, I started my dissertation, my Ph.D. research almost immediately, and within a few months I discovered really some very important things about these dark clouds in the Milky Way. The dark clouds seemed not to be made of ice or frozen water, but to be made of something much more complex. And the first attempt I had to try to understand that, the dust, was to say that they may be made mostly of the atom carbon. Right now, carbon is of course an important atom in life and so on, but at the beginning, in 1960, we couldn't really think of, we would dare not think of biology as being the source of these particles. So we said, and we explored the possibility that they were particles like the soot particles that come out of a flame, out of a fireplace, right? And so we examined more of the data, the astronomical data, and the astronomical data was also very interesting. The moment I started analyzing it, carbon sort of came out of, it just felt clear, loud and clear to me that this is made mainly of the element carbon. The dust in space, the vast quantities of dust in between the stars, was made of the element carbon. So the first attempt, as I said, was to interpret the carbon as like soot particles. Carbon just burning out of coal or coming out of very hot stars. And so on that basis, we made predictions, astronomical predictions. We told astronomers to look at this particular region of the electromagnetic spectrum, see whether there is a signature of carbon, signature of graphite, and so on. And all of this was happening from 1962 to the sort of beginning of the middle of the 1970s, and the progression of work that we did, starting with carbon soot particles, and at the end of a decade of work, we decided that these particles cannot be simple soot particles. They had to be complex organic material. So what is the organic material made of? Then we made various predictions and looked for evidence and so on and so forth. And we ended up in 1974 publishing a whole stream of papers in this journal Nature, which I have a copy here. I just found thousands of papers here.
Right.
Arguing that the dust in space was not made of ice, but was made of organic material, right? Organic molecules, because of formaldehyde, because of all sorts of other complex molecules. And then we provoked the astronomers in other fields of astronomy. Radio astronomy was a burgeoning new discipline, right?
Yeah.
Deploying radio telescopes, microwave detectors and so on, trying to find out what these materials in space were actually composed of. And those new data were pointing to organic molecules, unequivocally to organic molecules. And by 1974, we came to the conclusion that maybe these dust particles were made of organic molecules that could be relevant to life. We didn't say it was life itself. For instance, formaldehyde, amino acids, and we wrote papers about that. They were, of course, not entirely accepted at the time, but it was ferocious debates and the columns of Nature between me and Fred Hoyle and a guy called Carl Sagan, who was the protagonist of the standard ideas. So it was a rough fight, but we just looked at the data. We didn't worry about the sociology of what was going on. We didn't worry about the history of the subject that was sort of going in a different direction, had gone in a different direction. We just kept on looking at the facts, and the facts, as I would say, inexorably pointed in the direction of life. Right? So by late 1974, we were publishing papers with the title Life Molecules in Space Are Interstellar Dust Grains, the Seeds of Life in the Universe, and thus was born the new version of panspermia, the theory of panspermia that is attributed to me and to Fred Hoyle. But at this point, I should say that panspermia itself predated us by many centuries, many millennia, in fact. It predated Aristotle. There was a Greek philosopher called Anaxagoras. He was before Socrates, a Greek Socratic philosopher, and he maintained very eloquently that life cannot be something that is started on the earth, that life has to be cosmic, has to be universal. And so this word panspermia comes from him. Pans meaning cross, spermata meaning seeds, so seeds of life everywhere. So this is the origin of the rival theory that I took up in 1974-75, was in fact had a pedigree that went in Western Europe back to Anaxagoras, and I should also state that in India, in ancient India, it went back even further. The idea that life is a truly cosmic affair is deeply, deeply ingrained in Vedic Indian culture. So there was sort of cultural backdrop. There was a cultural backdrop to all of this, and I mean we didn't take any note of it. We just noted it in passing. This didn't play any decisive role. But as we kept accumulating more and more and more data, and this is the first book that we wrote. We wrote lots of stuff.
Could you hold it a bit closer? Yeah, for the camera. So it's Life Cloud.
The origins of life in the universe or something like that.
And when was this published?
1970, 76.
In the 70s, right. Right, I see.
So this was very early publication of a book, and this was after publishing loads and loads of papers in the scientific journals, and then eventually we also decided that not only the sort of bacteria and simple life forms, but the whole of evolution was dictated by the cosmos, by cosmic dust and
Evolution from space, yeah.
And these were sort of really made a huge, this autograph I've read as well, this particular but they made headlines, the Times, all the newspapers in London and stuff. And they made headlines, they were revered in some circles, they were abhorred in some other circles, and scientists were really quite worried that their most fundamental of beliefs were being shattered.
This is the point I was trying to ask as well. You and Sir Fred Hoyle challenged the most fundamentals of the established norms or the theories of science, as well as possibly even religion here, because you're referring to the fact that life started and elsewhere, not on planet Earth, the origins of life rather, and it was brought down, but again, the Hindu Vedic traditions, the stories refer to very similar things in a historic format. Even in Sri Lanka, where you and I come from, what I call the Rama Ravana, or in Indian Ram Ravan, epics refer to extraterrestrials. Now, viruses. Do we not get viruses even in this day and age? The last being the major COVID-19 virus, and various flu viruses, various pandemics and epidemics turn up. Are you highlighting them, or are you sort of crediting them to viruses that come from outside of planet Earth?
Yeah, a fraction of them. And so I showed you those other two books. The next book we wrote was The Diseases in Space. And in that book, what we did, this is the date of the book is 1979, okay, quite early on. What we did was to look at the epidemiology of influenza, historically,
the flu,
in the last 100 years. And there was a lot of documentation about one particular, just like the COVID pandemic, it was a major influenza pandemic that happened in 1918 to 1919. Okay? And it was ripped across the whole world. The first outbreaks, the very first outbreaks of this influenza virus took place in Mumbai, and Boston, United States, on the same day. Every bit of evidence that we could get from elsewhere showed that there's nothing in the world apart from these two foci of attacks. And now, 1918, 1919, there was no air travel to go from Bombay or from Sri Lanka to the United States to months and months and months. So how on earth could this virus be transferred in the way that people say that viruses necessarily have to be transferred, that one person infecting another, chain reaction going across the world. So we studied the available details of the pandemic in 1918, 1919. And then since then we've studied all the subsequent influenza pandemics, all the way even up to the COVID. And there is a really compelling body of evidence that people are just totally obstinately not looking at, that there is a component of these epidemic diseases that you cannot explain by a simple person-to-person transmission. For instance, in the latest COVID story, there was a ship at sea for 2 months, I think, right? And the ship sailed without any COVID, they tested negative for COVID and so on. in the middle of the ocean, after a month and a half in the ocean, all the passengers came down with COVID. So they had to try to understand this, and I think they're still struggling, but I think I have stopped, in fact, pushing that particular aspect of panspermia because it is politically charged. It's more charged than ever post-COVID. I think COVID had a person-to-person transmission, there's no question about it. But the first attacks coming from space, I think, is still absolutely valid and obscured. The data is obscured because of the extent of transmissions also between people that there was in this case. No? But the diseases from space, I think, encapsulated the idea that most viral diseases have an ultimate origin in space, in the deep cosmos, and viruses are the cause of disease, that's for sure. But viruses, we also know, are vitally responsible for provoking evolution. They carry information that can be slipped into our genes, the genes of animals and plants and so on. So we have argued that a major part of the whole story of evolution of life is connected with cosmic viruses, bringing in new information and so forth. So that's the broad outline.
Sure. It's a fascinating insight there. Talking about Sir Fred Hoyle, your first involvement or contact with Sir Fred Hoyle was at Cambridge, or where was it, and how did it all start?
At Cambridge, I had read, I was from a very early age, I was interested in science. I read quite widely, not that much, but just interested in the world around me, in literature generally, particularly in classical literature and English poetry and so on. But on top of that, I also had a very, very powerful interest in science. So I kept reading books by Fred Hoyle, even by Arthur C. Clarke. I have quite a few books that I read in my childhood. And these were sort of before I even started learning science at an advanced level in school. But at the end of my schooling in Royal College, Colombo, I went to the University of Ceylon.
This was in Colombo?
Colombo.
Right.
And I read mathematics. I did a bachelor's degree in mathematics, and I think I became a long way the first number one and made a huge impact there. And so at the end of that, I applied for a Commonwealth scholarship to the UK. This was a scheme that was just starting in 1959, 1960, and I was among the first batch of Commonwealth scholars to go to be selected from London. And then I had to decide where I want to do my further studies. I decided on Cambridge for several reasons. One, because I knew that astronomy was my sort of really passionate interest, and I knew that astronomy has been very, very strong and a deep history of astronomy in Cambridge. But more than that, there was a personal connection as well. My father, at age 20 or something, he went to Cambridge.
I see.
When I got scholarship, and he got the highest honors. He came first in the mathematical tripos. He had his teachers. He had guys like G.H. Hardy, who taught Ramanujan, right?
Yes.
He had Eddington, the astronomer who discovered the bending of sunlight or starlight by the sun. So all those were connections, were letters in the family archives from these guys to my father. So that was a natural place to to go to my father's old university, which was Cambridge. So
and just to interrupt you there, your father came back to Sri Lanka, Ceylon at that time, or what?
My father was desperately interested in getting academic position in Ceylon. I think there was, and at that time there was no way of thinking about getting jobs in England. So he was looking for openings in the University College, Colombo, it was called, right?
At that time, yeah.
There was just one professor of mathematics and a few lecturers, and there was no hope of any of them retiring. So it was pretty bleak for prospects of becoming an academic in Ceylon. So the next best thing for him to get a job was to sit an examination, a civil service examination. This was a system of selecting people for imperial administration that was, in fact, not entirely British. It was borrowed from the Chinese, right? So
Yes.
the British copied the system. They had very rigorous examination, very difficult examination. So my father took the examination for the civil service. He came pretty high up in it, and he was posted as I think as a very high official in the state of Bihar in India.
Oh, so right. So this was he sat the civil service, the Ceylon civil service, and his first posting was to India in Bihar. Oh.
It was at that time, I think it was a unified civil service examination.
I see.
To place anywhere, could be placed in Ceylon, but if the Ceylon cadre was filled, then they would. So in fact, he would have liked to come back to Ceylon, but he was posted in India. He hated India because that was the time that people were agitating for independence, right? And the state of Bengal was in a huge.
Very much a militant uprising there, Bengal.
So he returned and then had a family and got a job. So that's where I came to the planet. Yeah.
Right. So you are from Colombo, basically, or from outside of Colombo? Where is home for you in Ceylon, Sri Lanka?
I was in a suburb in Colombo. Now it is in the heart of Colombo. It was called Mambalapitiya in those days.
Which was far away from Colombo Fort then.
All the houses around me were sort of bungalows, right? There were no sort of multi-story buildings.
Yes, yeah.
And I used to walk out from sort of muddy road, if it wasn't road, it was not a very good Hilton place, then go to Gold Road, which was a fairly narrow road in the town. There were buses.
This is fascinating history, even for me, because when you say, did you say Skeleton Road? So that was through Dickman's Road or Lester James Peary's Mawata today, and that was a narrow, muddy road, and Gold Road was very small, right? And
so I went to Gold Road, up to Gold Road. This is my routine. Every sort of 6 o'clock every day, or 5:30 every day. I used to, before sunset, do this walk up to Gold Road, cross Gold Road, and go. I think the road called Francis Road.
Yes, Balavata, yes.
Go to the beach and walk on the beach for maybe an hour or so, thinking about various things, and then return. So that's where I got my inspiration for everything, really.
So from Bambalapitiya, Colombo 4, you went to Royal College, proceeded to the University of Ceylon, and graduated in 1960 with a BSc First Class Honours in Mathematics, came over to Trinity College, Cambridge, followed by Jesus College, Cambridge, and then you joined the academic staff at the university in Cambridge, or what happened after that?
I was a student at my old father's old college, which was Trinity College, the poshest Cambridge College, and I enjoyed that. It's a beautiful building, beautiful college. So I spent my 3 years as a Ph.D. student there, and during that time I wanted to bring that book out, but I couldn't locate it. I won a prize in Trinity College, a very prestigious prize called the Howell Prize for an original English poem. Right? People there still remember that I beat all the guys who were doing English honours and English travels and so on. I won this as as a research student in the School of Mathematics. Anyway, so after my PhD from Trinity, I applied for fellowships in different colleges. And the first college to appoint me a fellow was Jesus. So I accepted the fellowship at Jesus College. I was there for 10 years as a research fellow and as a teaching fellow. I taught undergraduates there, and I also did my research. So that was my next step. Then, at the end of that, I decided I should perhaps move forward and look for professorship. Professorship in those days was very rare. Now everybody, everyone is a professor, right? In every university. It's sort of an employment grade in our business. But it was very rare. And so there was an advertisement for professor and head of the Department of Applied Mathematics at University College, Cardiff. Not even Cardiff University. Right?
Which today is University of Cardiff, right? Cardiff University, right? Okay.
So I applied for that, and within a few days of my application going, the principal of the college telephones me and says, "You got the job."
Well done.
You got the job.
Yeah.
There's an interview and so on. But so I went there. I was charged with setting up a new development in astronomy, which I did. So I did a lot of things there. But I wasn't very happy at the end of the day in Cardiff, so I decided to go my own way, and I just stayed on in Cardiff, but I have connections with all the universities.
Yes, even in the United Kingdom and in Sri Lanka as well. Yeah, I mean, what has been your involvement with other universities, higher educational establishments, and so on, in relation to panspermia, as well as the other points that you are a professor in, such as applied mathematics and so on?
Well, I've been visiting so many universities, both in the United States, in Europe, Japan. I had a long stint in Japan. So I was, after leaving Cardiff in a sort of formal connection, I was a free agent, and I was just going around the world doing my own research and accepting positions of visiting lecturers and visiting professors and so on. So that's something that I really cherish.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have chosen anything different. I had the freedom to do what I wanted. And the other thing that happened was that Fred Hoyle left Cambridge, and he was connected with Cardiff and with all the places that I was connected with. So we had, right until his death, we had a very close working relationship.
And when did he pass away?
2002.
2002. So the what is called the Hoyle-Wickramasinghe model of panspermia, is it still happening? Is it still progressing, or has it stopped the process?
That's a model of the life in the universe that is absolutely 100% for certain now. Because every bit of evidence that has come in the last 20, 30 years has supported that point of view.
I see.
And only in the last year, last 6 months, there's been a spate of new results coming from the James Webb Telescope, which is the most powerful telescope in the world, and they have found evidence for microbial life on an alien planet called an exoplanet, 24 light years away from our solar system. So light takes 124 years to reach that. It's a very distant system. And astronomers and chemists and so on have found evidence of a molecule called dimethyl sulfide, which is only known to be produced by living organisms. Right? So a lot of money has been spent. The James Webb Telescope is a very powerful telescope, very expensive telescope, to achieve the result that we had we had obtained with very little expense that life is a truly cosmic phenomenon. They are finding life now in places like that, in exoplanets, spending a lot of money and taking, essentially, swiping the credit from us, Fred and me, for themselves, because they spend more money. The more money, and even if the result is weak, you make big fanfare of it. If we take our stuff, almost at zero cost,
Sure.
the intellectual cost we found all of this stuff, and it's being sidelined for data that's been coming now, supporting our point of view. And I think there's a lot of cultural angst there, a lot of racism.
That's true. Yeah. So I think, however, one way of looking at it is the Wickramasinghe Hoyle contribution stands as a foundation to what has been since discovered and continues to be discovered going further forward. I would have thought that's another way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think there's no question about it. I think the fullness of time, if an objective scientist, objective historian looks at the whole sequence of events that took place from the 1960s when I went to Cambridge, through the 1970s, through the 1980s, when everybody was against the idea of life being cosmic, right? It's a very quite hard vibe into our competitors to say that life cannot be a cosmic phenomenon. Life cannot be outside of the Earth and so on. That's changed, or changing very rapidly, and the accumulated evidence is sort of growing by the day. Accumulation of different types of evidence, but I think our contribution stands solid and immovable, even if it is ignored by our present generation of guys who want to claim things for themselves. I think I have the consolation that it's all there in the books and the literature, all these things that I've written, hundreds of books, and I sent you a lot of...
Oh, you did. Yes, we will put that on the description, the footnote on this. One other point I was going to ask Professor Wickramasinghe is if somebody wants to have a detailed look at your work, etc., do you have a sort of a pointed website or a web link? Or
Yeah, there are plenty of web links. I think profchandra.org is...
profchandra.org. We'll put that on the final version of this interview when it's broadcast. So I have to take you back to Sri Lanka. There is some reference to in 2012, towards the end of December, in Polonnaruwa, it was observed there was a green fireball that was observed in Polonnaruwa in Sri Lanka, and that it disintegrated into fragments and fell at a village called, is it Aralaganvilla and Dimulagala? Just walk us through of that incident and what came about from the scientific investigations.
Yeah, that's still ongoing, the scientific investigations of the Polonnaruwa stone. I mean, the background is that meteorites fall from time to time, big chunks of rocks which are burnt out comets. And the interest for us, for panspermia, is that we think that comets, right, have liquid water interiors and so on for most of their lives, and they are the carriers and the sort of breeding ground for bacteria, for cosmic bacteria. Okay, so when a comet disintegrates, you get the meteorite bits and rocks and so on coming out of it, and they sometimes fall on our planet. And this is one of the events that happened in Aralaganvilla near Polonnaruwa. And fortunately for me, I had a contact in the Medical Research Institute, the MRI, in Sri Lanka. He telephoned me and said that this has happened, and he has no doubt that the stones fell from the skies. This was in a very remote part of Sri Lanka, 20 miles out of Colombo. The farmer was tending his paddy fields, newly planted paddy fields, and then he suddenly saw a whole stream of meteors in the sky, and he called them collaborators.
Fireflies.
Fireflies. And these fireflies then came down on the earth. Some maybe fell on his head. The guy was so scared that he just ran into his house and shut himself up for the next morning. And he went out in the next morning and found the whole paddy field splattered with these strange-looking rocks. So my contact at the Medical Research Institute got in touch with me and said that this is really must be very interesting to you because this fell from the skies. You don't know any other way in which they could have come down onto this paddy field. So we quickly took a flight to Sri Lankan and collected some stuff. I had a student working on similar matters, so he also came with us. The student was called Jamie Wallace, right? So he collected some stuff, and Jamie Wallace did the first analysis of these rocks and concluded there is no doubt that they came from space. There's no signature that bound them to the Earth, right? In particular, any rock on the Earth, on our planet, has two different forms of oxygen in their structure, oxygen 16, oxygen 17. That ratio, oxygen 16 to oxygen 17, is the same everywhere on the Earth. If you look at the clouds, rocks, and so on. Now, on the stones, the ratio is different, dramatically different. So, on that basis, the claim was that these were definitely meteorites. But wait, the really important and interesting thing is that when he put these rocks under the electron microscope, there were fossilized organisms, diatoms they're called, and also sort of bacterial fossils by the hundreds. Inside was sort of full of. So it was really the lake on a comet that got fossilized essentially, and in fact, all of these organisms before the stuff finally fell on the earth. So this is still being looked at. I should tell you now that I hate to bring in sociological.
No, go ahead. It's very interesting. Yes.
It remains true. So we presented this to all sorts of guys who are interested in meteorite hunters around the world. And a certain American meteorite hunter had then made a trip to Sri Lanka and tried to get evidence of the meteor falling down. So he asked everyone, have you had a video recording of the fall? In those days, in 2000, no one had even these cell phones, so there was no video recording. And so on that basis, he rejected the idea that it's a meteorite, and he also made a really statement that is on the internet, that Sri Lankans are so primitive, they cannot say the difference between dried cow shit and a meteorite.
Oh, that's pretty rude. Yes. I mean, is that because of certain Western interests based on established ideologies and so on?
Partly, I think almost certainly that played a major role, because for 50 years before that, meteorites have been producing evidence of fossilized organisms, and people have tended to ignore them, even reject them, on no logical basis whatsoever. So, right from the 50s, 60s, there were meteorites that have been examined by various people under microscopes in the laboratories. They claimed that there was evidence of life, but this was all sort of essentially hushed up or ignored because they thought they were contaminants. And contaminant is a good word to say that that's not worth bothering about. These are rocks that fell on the ground and they got contaminated by life on the ground. So it was very hard to counter that. I mean, our stuff from astronomy was much more secure, but you cannot say that the stars and the stellar material, the interstellar material, is contaminated by humans. So we were on a much secure basis in reaching out for the stars.
That's really fascinating. The overall the spectrum of our conversation, the recording today. Professor Nalin Chandra Wickramasinghe, mathematician, astronomer, and astrobiologist, thank you so much for joining us today on this program, Ideal Island, and sharing with us, all of us, the experiences, the first-hand and the second-hand experiences through various parties on panspermia. I thank you very much.